Well, looky what we have here.
You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
If you're a regular listener at all, you know that I hate the term binge watching. I hate this idea of gulping in stories and shows all at once. And I know that there's some people, like when you ask them, hey, you watching Game of Thrones? No, I'm waiting till it ends, and then I'm just going to binge watch it. And that's, if that's what you want to do, that's your prerogative. But I prefer, I've had to do the waiting game on these things. I was an early episode I did where somebody mentioned to me, my dad gave me the Raiders of the Lost Ark box set, and I watched them over a weekend. And I'm like, hey, that's great. That took 7 years of my life to watch all three of the original Indiana Jones movies from 81 to 89. So 8 years of my life. Back to the Future took 6. So I guess it's just we were taught, my generation anyways, was taught to wait. That, Star Wars comes out and it's great. And you now have 3 years to collect as many toys as you can before the next one comes out. And we were taught patience. I grew up without a microwave. So if you wanted to heat up your dinner, you put it in the oven, and it took 30 minutes to get to a edible temperature. We didn't get a microwave till I was, 12 or 13. They were very expensive. They were as expensive as VCRs. And there was something that was considered a luxury item. Now, you can buy a microwave for $20. You can buy, you don't need a VCR, and you can buy a DVD player for $5 if you really need it. But everything's digital now, although I keep amassing this ever-growing collection of DVDs because I'm terrified that certain titles are not going to be available, and I want to make sure that once I buy it. I have that movie. And that's just, that's just a generation gap. That's just because I'm old. That's just because you just raised differently, I used to laugh at Rachel's mother, who was raised during the Depression. So she was raised to save everything. She saved newspapers, napkins, fast food utensils, fast food condiments, everything that you could amass a collection of, you did, because you never know when it was not going to be available. And that's just the way she was raised, So each generation has their thing, Rachel and I were talking that I have a external hard drive, 2 terabyte external hard drive, and I have files from 2000 to 2015 probably, where we used to go places with our digital camera. And I remember the first one I bought was this big, remember the first digital cameras? Big, bulky ones. It took 4 AA batteries to operate, and the battery door always broke. This was a little tiny piece of plastic keeping it. So I used to wrap zip ties around it to keep the batteries in it. But Rachel would take that camera and fill it up with 100 pictures from every trip we went on, every outing. And then I would load them in, and finally I sat down and categorized them by year. And we have these huge blocks of memories, all by year, and yet they end, even though digital photography has grown, storing digital pictures has not. Because everything Rachel now has past 2011, there was some crossover. It's all on social media. It's all on Facebook. So I've gone from keeping giant photo albums full of printed out pictures from, Photomat and Thrifty Twin Pics, to digital files of hundreds of pictures, to trusting a corporation now that they're not going to go out of business and delete or have an error and delete all those memories. Delete them all. Because they're all just pixels. They're all just digital pieces of information floating somewhere in a supercomputer holding pattern. Have you ever seen pictures of the YouTube servers? They're these massive, building-sized servers that are kept at, the same exact temperature, and people aren't allowed down there. And I don't think the average person even understands. They say the cloud. They're in the cloud, man. And Apple's very savvy to say the cloud, because it's like Willy Wonka. Where is he? He's above our heads in a million pieces in the cloud. Well, the cloud isn't up. The cloud is down. All of these clouds are installations on Earth. They're big supercomputer storage units. They're big external hard drives being kept cooled and processed and ready, so that with multiple fail safes, so that people's lives don't vanish in an instant. It's going to happen one day, and I'm not saying that with glee. I'm saying that with terror, that somebody is going to screw up and one of these servers' fail safes is going to fail, and we're going to lose a huge portion of somebody's life on the internet. And that being said, going back to the binge watching and the degeneration thing that I was talking about before, I watched all of Black Mirror, and I've been putting these episodes out sporadically of reviewing the episodes. And they're great episodes. They're very well done. Some of the finest writing I've ever seen on television. They're just stellar. The problem that I have with them is that they're bleak. And that was the problem with Bandersnatch, the Choose Your Own Adventure one, was that it was so bleak. You couldn't get a happy ending to save your life. And I'm an eternal optimist. So with no choice to be happy, it bogged me down. And I watched a lot of it until I simply just couldn't take the dreariness anymore. And correct me if I'm wrong, that seems to be the British sensibility, is everything's dreary, it's always raining, it's always gray, and you're not allowed to grandstand or be proud of things. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. I'm just going by the movies that I see. But in the case of Black Mirror, like, some of them are incredibly dark. The characters are screwed to the infinite degree because they've made some wrong choice involving technology. And along comes the anomaly. And the anomaly is San Junipero, which is what we're going to talk about. And San Junipero is a revelation. It's a masterpiece. I don't throw that word around lightly. I just watched San Junipero. Try it again. I just watched San Junipero again for the fourth time, and I'm still struck by it. There are so few creative properties that I want to jump into the screen. The first was when I was a kid. It was Star Wars. I had this dream. I was a real clever kid. Really dumb clever. I thought, I know Star Wars isn't real, but Fantasy Island is. So if I could just get Mr. Rourke to let me on Fantasy Island, my fantasy would be to be an X-Wing fighter pilot, and then I would get on and in Star Wars. That's not a joke, folks. I watched Fantasy Island religiously, trying to figure out, was it on Hawaii? Is it a different island? How do I get there? How do I get Mr. Rourke and Tattoo? This is Jeff Tucker. He's got a dream. That's right, Tattoo. His dream is to become an X-Wing fighter pilot. Mr. Tucker, welcome. Oh, it's great to be here. You know what I mean? Like, I walked it through, man. And the end result was always the same, that I was going to fly an X-Wing fighter and blow up the Death Star. I mean, those are the dreams I had. You know my fascination with Back to the Future of, I didn't want to watch the movie. I wanted to be in the movie. I wanted to go back in time and see my parents and fix things and do all that amazing stuff. And then after that, I sort of grew up, and I like movies and I enjoy TV shows, but I never fantasized about joining the ranks of those characters. And yet San Junipero comes along and offers something that is too good to pass up. So major spoilers are ahead. We're going to spoil every inch of this show. So if you've not seen Black Mirror San Junipero, go watch it before you listen to this. That way I would never want to rob anyone of the surprises and the fun of this episode, because it is all over the place. It's a roller coaster of up, down, which makes good drama. So anyways, you've had your warning. Pause here. Hey, welcome back. Okay, so San Junipero opens on the seaside town of San Junipero. It's by the ocean. It's gorgeous. It's picture perfect. And we meet a young girl. We're going to find out that her name is Yorkie, just like the dog. And it's 1987. And everybody is dressed flawlessly. The neon is right. The cars are right. The music is right. It's one of the best representations of recreating the 80s that I've ever seen. And I think that's a huge appeal to me, in that they really did their homework. The video games are right. The cars are right. The fashion is perfect. Even the background, way in the back, extras look good. And we meet Yorkie, and she's on her way down the street to a club called Tucker's, which is a nice touch. And she's shy. She is not dressed for clubbing. And she's completely out of place. She's fish out of water. And she meets and she sees a girl that we're going to find out whose name is Kelly. And Kelly is rebuffing a man that she obviously has had an encounter with. She's had sex with this guy, and she doesn't want to do it again. And she pushes him off and tells him to hit a club called the Quagmire, which sounds weird. And then we're inside Tucker's, and the music is great. The video games, Bubble Bobble is great. It's weird to see a club in a movie because people in the movies, they go to clubs to dance and to meet somebody and to move the story along. They don't go to a club to kill time. So to see video games in a club like there were in the 80s is a huge, on the button touch in this episode. So this guy, who we're going to find out only hangs out in the video game section, talks about Bubble Bobble being the only game with multiple endings depending on one or two players. They look at a game called Top Speed, and she sort of blanches at it and says, "That's not for me." And then she meets Kelly, and Kelly is on the run from that guy, and they meet. And it's what you call a cute meet, a meet cute. It's a writer's thing. How do you get these two characters together? So we have Yorkie, the fish out of water, and Kelly, the girl who's running San Junipero, or knows how to run it, if that makes sense. And they go to the bar, and they just sort of talk about what it's like in this town. And there's some weird dialogue of Yorkie wearing glasses, but not needing glasses, and how they're only going to be in San Junipero for a short amount of time. It's very weird. So they end up in the alley. Yorkie freaks out because Kelly puts the moves on her. Kelly's up for anything, and Yorkie doesn't know what she wants. So they end up in the alley and it's raining. And again, the neon is perfect. The cars are perfect. The color palette is perfect. And Yorkie again stresses that she's never done this before. She's never gone dancing in her life. This is all new to her. And Kelly's like, I'll show you the ropes. You want to come back to my place and go to bed with me? She's very direct. Because there's some weird time limit. And if they don't make a choice now, they won't have the time to make the choice ever. Or, as they talk, you realize they have to wait another week to get back to San Junipero. So it's a really sweet two women coming together. Are they going to have a relationship or not? But then there's some weird overtones to it. And then it just abruptly stops and cuts to 1 week later. And 1 week later, we see Yorkie getting ready to go to the club again. And she's trying on new looks. So she tries on a Breakfast Club look with Don't You Forget About Me playing. She plays a little bit of Girlfriend in a Coma. Then she plays Robert Palmer and dresses up as a Robert Palmer girl. And in the end, she goes back to just being herself. Just plain old sweatered Yorkie. And when she gets to the club, Kelly is gone. Kelly's there and then she's gone. Kelly's there talking to this really mulleted guy about computer tech. It's all very boring. And so her and Yorkie end up in the bathroom. And Yorkie finally just says, look, I need to do this, but I don't know what I'm doing. Can't you just make it easy for me? I mean, it's a really touching relationship moment of, she doesn't say it, but she is saying, I really like you, but I am scared to death. And can't you make this easy for me? And Kelly does. So they go back to her place, this amazing house on the beach. You know, you have sort of an inkling of, or an idea of, boy, Kelly must be worth a fortune to have a house literally on the water. And then you find out at the end of this encounter that was Yorkie's first time with anybody. Even though she keeps saying she has a fiance named Greg. So again, we're 20, 25 minutes into this thing. And it's just this two women coming together relationship thing. It's all set against the backdrop of 1987. There's no politics. There's nothing like, they don't watch the news or anything. It's just this feeling and the look and the music in the background. There's a quick moment of Kelly drives her Jeep and almost hits another car, and Yorkie is completely freaked out from it. But it just passes quickly because you really do like Yorkie and you really do like Kelly and you do like them together. And you wonder, well, in the natural progression of drama, something has to tear these two apart. Is there going to be another person? Because we meet that guy, Wes, that was tailing Kelly at the beginning. But he's not much of a roadblock. He's there just to provide little nuggets of information that kind of is leading us in different ways. So it cuts to a week later, again with the title card, 1 week later. And it's not 1987 anymore. It's the early 1980s. And there's Ricardo Montalban talking about rich Cordobian leather. And you're like, wait a minute. And they're playing different music. What's happening? Are they time travelers? I mean, it's Black Mirror, so anything's possible. You're lost. You're completely lost. Yorkie goes into the club, and now the music is different. The time frame and clothes are different. The video games are different. And there's no Kelly. And she's gone. So it cuts again, and we're in the early 2000s. Or the late 90s. Because they're playing Alanis Morissette. You're like, wait a minute, wait, what? They're time travelers? Why are they traveling through time? It's very disorienting, but it's supposed to be. And Kelly is gone. And then finally, Yorkie finds her. And you get the feeling that this relationship was way too close for anybody. And that it scared all of them. So Yorkie ends up on a roof. And Kelly has to go up there and try to talk her down. She's not there to kill herself. It's just a place to have a conversation. Because you realize at this moment in the show that nothing's real. They're not time travelers. They're in a simulated world. And that each of them has a secret life, a real life, outside of San Junipero. We find out that Kelly is in Carson City, Nevada, at an old folks' home. And Yorkie is in a hospital in Santa Rosa. And they're just talking so nonchalant about it that you're like, I'm still a little, I don't get it. And then it cuts to Carson City, and we see a very old woman who is the real Kelly. And she's been visiting San Junipero. You get, one session a week because they don't want you to get addicted to it and want to die and go there. Instead, they parcel it out to see if it's something you like. And so Kelly makes the trek to Santa Rosa to see Yorkie for real. And it's a very touching, it's a sci-fi moment, but it's the reason that sci-fi can be so satisfying, because it can give you things that real life just can't. And we find out that Yorkie is a quadriplegic. She can't move anything. She can only hear. And Kelly goes in the room and puts her hand on her forehead and says, "Hello, stupid." And it's just so touching and so real. Then we meet Greg. We find out that Greg is her nurse. And that in the world that we're in, it takes the doctor, the nurse, and a family member, and the person, to sign off to, when you die, be permanently transferred to San Junipero. Your consciousness uploaded to the servers of San Junipero. And that's when we get Kelly's real story. And here's the difference between American television and British television. In American television, Yorkie would tell us this information in San Junipero. It would be this big, giant, emotional moment. You don't know me. This is what happened to me, and why I'm the way I am. And instead, in the more not conservative, but tight emotioned British version of entertainment, Greg just spills it out over coffee and says, Yorkie came out to her parents at 21. They didn't accept it. She went driving and she wrecked her car. And she has been a quadriplegic for 40 plus years. And her parents won't sign to let her cross over because it's against their religion. It's done so matter-of-factly, and it hits you like a semi-truck of so many different things of, coming out to your parents, being rejected, loss, destruction of your body, being trapped in a shell like that for 40 years, and then finally finding a way out. And then when you play it back and watch the show again, you see all those emotions in Yorkie when she's walking and moving and stuff that she cannot do in the real life, stuff that Kelly takes for granted. And yet Yorkie never tells her because it's not anything she needs. She wants to be accepted as just another citizen of San Junipero. And back at the hospital, Kelly asks for 5 minutes in San Junipero with Yorkie, and she uses that to bang, drop to one knee and ask to marry her so that she can sign her over. It's incredibly touching. It's incredibly generous, and it's something that, as a writer, I did not see coming. And it really floored me how good it was. So she signs all the papers, and we watch Yorkie be euthanized. And her consciousness uploaded to San Junipero. Now she's there in the daytime on the surf. And we cut back to Kelly, and we find out that Kelly's had a long life. She's had a marriage of 49 years, and her husband, when he died, did not upload to the program. He preferred to die natural. So he's not there for her. And that's why she's been living this crazy life, you know. I didn't even talk about Yorkie's quick trip to the quagmire, where we see these broken people trying to feel something by engaging in S&M and hardcore music and maybe even drugs, but they're not real, so nothing is permanent. There are no scars, you know what I'm saying? But Kelly has scars, and the scars are that her daughter died at age 39 before San Junipero was invented. So her daughter was lost forever, and her husband went the same route. So when Yorkie just assumes that Kelly's going to cross over and be with her forever, Kelly's pissed. And she says, "You never even asked about me. You don't know my story. I married you out of pity so that you could stay here. I didn't marry you out of love." And that's where the show has its only real moments of despair, where it looks as if these two are not going to stay together. And because we're so, or at least I was, emotionally invested in both of them being together, it hits you hard. And you really feel for Kelly's story. And Kelly ends up driving her Jeep and launching herself through the window to feel something, anything. But she vanishes. And in the real world, we see her getting even older and older. And finally, she decides to be euthanized. But we're not told what her choice is. And guess what? The show then ends with credits. And you think, oh my God, because we see Kelly's coffin being lowered into the ground. And that Yorkie's going to be alone. I mean, Yorkie will probably find somebody, right? And at the last moment, Kelly shows up in all her young, vibrant glory in San Junipero. And her and Yorkie literally drive off into the sunset to the tune of Belinda Carlisle's "Heaven is a Place on Earth," the perfect song. And if you go back to Yorkie getting ready, "Girlfriend in a Coma" is the perfect song for that moment. And I'm not usually a fan of this on-the-button stuff. If you watch Forrest Gump, every musical beat accompanies the narrative, you know. When Jenny leaves the guy in L.A., you hear Jim Morrison, "Do you love her as she's walking out the door?" And they do every moment in Forrest Gump, the music is perfect. San Junipero's the same thing, but you know what? I'm okay with that, because I'm going to talk in another episode about a movie I'm watching called Vice, where there's a similar thing employed that it makes me cringe, but we'll get to that. So they're playing Belinda Carlisle's "Heaven is a Place on Earth," which is perfect. And I read the book, the Black Mirror companion book, and Charlie Booker, the writer, said that they knew "Girlfriend in a Coma" would be perfect for that scene, and it cost almost as much as anything else they'd ever paid for on the show. The most expensive music license ever. I mean, the Smiths are not cheap, right? So kudos to them for writing the check on that, because they don't even play the whole song. It gets cut off quite quickly. But as Yorkie and Kelly drive away, we then cut to Tucker's, not the club, but the computer conglomerate corporation, where we see these robot arms adding new people to San Junipero to the servers. And we see that San Junipero is heaven on earth. It's these gorgeous illuminescent lights that represent forever. And as I said at the beginning, I was so struck by how touching the episode was on two levels. The first is the story of Yorkie and Kelly is very touching. The second is I want that to be real so bad. I want to live my life, and then, are you kidding? I could live in 1987 forever in a computer program. I mean, I would know it's a computer program. It's not the Matrix. Even Kelly's Yorkie says at one point, you could unplug at any time. It's not, you're not trapped there. But how great would that be? I mean, if you're a religious person, you believe in heaven, I get that. Your reward is awaiting. But there's something about the recreation of nostalgia. They call it in the show nostalgia immersion therapy. You know, I've always joked I'm going to do a Kickstarter for a gated community where inside the gated community, it's always 1987. We have a Blockbuster. You know, all the cars have to be 87 or before. You don't see any satellite dishes unless it's those big ones from the 80s. But for all appearances from the outside, it's 1987. And then on New Year's Eve, everybody gets together for a big party in the assembly hall, and we ring in 1987 again. I mean, that's my dream. So to watch this episode and see somebody take it to the nth level of immersing yourself in 1987, it was really startling. And I admitted I wept like a baby the first time I saw it. I got Rachel to watch it, and Rachel was like, I don't get it, man. I don't know why you're so into it. I'm like, well, you know, I'm nostalgic for all these other reasons. You know, I love living in today. I think we're living in the greatest moments of time right now. We have medicine that allows us to live nearly forever if we don't get a terminal disease. We have entertainment the likes of which no one's ever seen in the history of mankind. But I'll tell you, watching this episode, like at the end, if you could hit a switch and be in 1987, you know, in 1987 for most of 87, I was 15. I didn't get 16 until September, and there's only 3 months left. So to be 23 in 1987 forever, I can't even imagine. It's an amazing, tantalizing dream just out of reach. But it seems like we're getting there, right? It seems like technology could, and that's the whole beauty of Black Mirror, is that the technology's just around the corner. And for the most part in Black Mirror, it means destruction and death and terror and horror. But in the case of San Junipero, it means finding yourself in the past and living young and free and consequence-free forever. You know? Oh, I can't even imagine. Would I drink in 1987 if the alcohol wasn't real? I don't know. Isn't that weird? So, I really love this episode. I've watched it 4 times. I might watch it again. It is fantastic. I highly recommend you check it out. It won a lot of awards when it came out. I'm not sure how I missed it, but I'm glad I found it. And congrats to anyone who, Charlie Booker and everybody else who worked hard on this episode. It is a masterpiece. It is there's a Star Trek episode coming up, Star Trek themed episode of Black Mirror that's really good. As far as being ambitious and giant in scope, but San Junipero to me is the standout of the whole series. It is astounding. It is the high watermark of it. So it's fantastic. Again, check it out. And we'll get back to these Black Mirror reviews as soon as we can. I know there's a whole bunch of other episodes coming down the pike. So thanks to everyone for supporting me on Patreon. You guys are amazing. Michael, I know I owe you like 30 episodes. I'm so sorry. I get so bogged down, I want to do an episode coming up where I talk about some of the YouTube people that I watch, because I've really, embraced that YouTube is very entertaining, and there's a lot of stuff on there that's really, fun to watch and informative, and a lot of people doing great work, and a lot of I've been lucky enough to meet. So we'll do that in a couple of episodes. Thanks for tuning in. I am Jeff Tucker. I am the voice, and you're listening to 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?